All right, my name is Julie Lowe, and I'm from St. Peter the Apostle. A little bit of backstory about me. I grew up here in Savannah. I attended St. Peter's kindergarten through 8th grade and went on to St. Vincent, so I'm a product of Catholic education. However, when I completed my degree, I ended up working at Marsh Point Elementary. I taught there for 11 years, and I taught 11 of those years in pre-K. So the Georgia Pre-K uses right from the start, which are the Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards. And the system that we use for data collection is called the work sampling system. So even though I used it in its entirety in pre-K, the work sampling system is designed by Pearson, which is a fairly well-known testing company, and it's designed to be used for pre-K 3 through 3rd grade. So I'm going to run through, this is my live work sampling platform, so it has names and children's, all kinds of information in it. So we're going to kind of run through it today. I'm going to speak to it as it pertains to pre-K, but you'll see that as the standards are loaded in and all, it would work in various grade levels. So I like to tell everybody that my first year teaching was 2012, and that was the year they piloted and mandated that Georgia Pre-K was going to use the work sampling system. And so I've used it for 11 years. If you know a lot about education, you know we get something and we use it, and then we decide that doesn't work, we're going to do something else. They're still using this, so to me that speaks volumes. Like, it works. We're still using it. If we've used it for that long and it hasn't gone away, we must like it in some capacity. So I don't get paid by work sampling or Pearson, but anyways, I'm a proponent of it. So for that reason. So when I first started, somebody explained it to me. I got trained in it, but I got trained in it halfway through the school year, so that wasn't exactly helpful. But somebody explained it to me as it's a lot like Facebook, right? So you upload the work sample, the evidence in there, you tag it, who, what, when, where. And the great thing is the standards are loaded in here, so you're just looking for the standard and clicking. So it basically creates an electronic portfolio for each of your children. What's really nice about it is all kinds of different data. It can be created. You can figure out how to group your children based on mastery of which standard. You can figure out what you haven't covered, who needs to be grouped here because we haven't taught this standard to this group. When you go to have teacher-led conferences, you can single out a child's portfolio and you can sit there with the parents and you can pull up all of their evidence and all of their work. So we just did when we did quarter one, I pulled it up in my room and there was all of the evidence, for the children, for the parents to look at. So it's just a really nice data collection, basically. So when you come into work sampling, it looks like this. You have an evidence tab, you have a guidelines and a checklist tab, and you have a report tab. So if we're going to go in, and I'm going to just kind of show you what it would look like for entering observation. I'm having to use this tripod. This is not work. Okay. So when you go in and entering the evidence, all of your students are loaded, and you have a place for the date. You can title it, put in a description. The attachment is the main piece here because you can upload a picture, you can upload a checklist, you can actually upload a video. So we can get all of those different things in there. I tell people that my phone, or really an iPad, is basically on me all the time because it's my data collection. And if you push things into the cloud or in Google Photos, then no matter where you are, you can upload it into the work sampling. So in reality, we all go home and do work at night. So sometimes when my children are gone to bed, I'm quickly popping into work sampling. I can upload the picture. It's there in the cloud. I can tag it to whatever I need to. The other thing I will say about work sampling, just a disclaimer, is this is only as good as the data that you put into it. So they tell you in reality 15 minutes a day. If you can be diligent about putting in the data 15 minutes a day, so it's not accumulating and you're not getting overwhelmed by it, then it really works out better for all of its purposes. So you can go in, select a child. You can select the whole class. So if it was something, for example, if you had done a phonics activity and we were all naming a word that began with letter B, if everybody in the classroom was able to do that, then that might be I select all of the students. I can title it quickly. Usually for that, a checklist. Work sampling likes the title of M for matrix. It just says that we checked off that they all could do it. Really quickly, I could add a description. Just type in, identifies a word that begins with, with B. Then when I come down here to link the performance indicators, it's going to populate all of the domains. So for pre-K, and really I think Pearson does this for all grade levels, there's 7 different developmental domains. What you'll notice is missing is religion. And Caroline and I talked a lot about in our meeting, because this is Pearson and they're a testing developing company, the possibility of asking them to incorporate a religion tab in there for the diocese. I'm not sure that could be done, but they write assessment platform. So we talked about that, being able to add the 8th one as religion, so that we could import the content standards for religion. So then when you go under language and literacy, it will populate all of the different tabs that we have for language and literacy. This isn't going to let me scroll. I don't have a scroll on this mouse, but anyways, I would come down, there's much more, there goes all the way through D. I would go to, is a phonological awareness skill for pre-K. So anyways, you can check it, click next, and it will populate that every child there, you graded them on that standard, and you're done, and then that appears when you click save. Now when it goes in, you can see, and this is a running list. Now you can see that today I put in a matrix, identifies word that begins with letter B. There's all the children that we did it. This is period 1, so it's all there. So what this does is it keeps a live picture of everything here. I'm sorry, I don't have a scroll in this mouse, so I can't scroll down, but there's probably 500 pieces of evidence from this whole marking period that sits here in this table. And as I was talking about for individual students, you can filter out. So for example, when we did student-led conferences, I can go into Addison's portfolio. I can scroll all the way through her portfolio. I can pull up, this one has a work sample, so a picture of something that she did. We did Native American symbols recently when we were doing the Thanksgiving, so she has her Native American symbols, example of her name writing, all of those things that you would want to be, you can click in and make that bigger, all of those things that you would want to be able to show parents and be able to talk about. So to me, it's sort of like your proof. When you're giving that rating for can they do it yet, not yet, in progress, proficient, well, here's the piece of evidence that says Addison can write her name. Her S is still backwards. We want to work on that, but it's there and it's easy to look at for yourself when you're talking to parents about it. The other great thing about it is when we enter this piece of evidence, if you'll see down here, there's multiple standards that you can attach to it. So the idea is when you're putting work samples in there, you have what we call a rich work sample. So this one is number 1 in a pre-K standard, following directions. She completed the task. This was an independent small group activity. So she completed the task. She wrote her name. This was a writing sample. Social studies, past and present. We're talking about Native Americans, all of that. So the idea is when you're putting work samples in, the richer the data, the more you're collecting there. So we really try and work, if it's just a piece of paper that she wrote her name on it, is that as meaningful as something like this that has more standards that could be attached to it, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go back to our evidence. And even like in pre-K, so like very simple things like for social and emotional learning, or following directions in the classroom, doing things like these. These are observable things that you do all the time, but this is now proving that you have it in there to say, oh yes, we've done that, I've checked it off, they're capable of doing that. And then what happens after that is all your data is gone in. We use, for entering observation, we use photos, so a picture of something happening. The best example for that in pre-K is truly our center time. So for example, the other day I had children that were building with blocks. They had this elaborate zoo-scape built out where this is the habitat for the tigers and they're here, and this is for the elephants and all. Now I could write all that out, I could type all that out, but it's much more meaningful if there's simply a picture of it that says these children were building zoo habitats in it, and then I've attached it to the standard for social studies. So that's an example of where the photo would be more meaningful than sitting there writing out exactly what they did. Matrix, so that's the checklist, the phonics skills, things like that. We do play boom cards on the smartboard where they're matching a number to quantity. So we play that game in the morning as they've arrived. We can attach it in there and say that they've done it, just a quick checklist. The checklist or the matrix can also be used to prove that they can't do something. So for example, that identifies letter B. If I have a child that couldn't do that, then when I'm putting that on and I just carry around my classroom when I'm cleaning, doing things like that, just a simple checklist that had it. So I might just write identifies letter B. Well, so for anybody that can't do it, instead of checking all of those names when I enter the child's name, I would uncheck those and then make a separate one for them that says is working on identifying letter B. Or with adult guidance and support, discriminated, ball starts with B, cat did not. So you can adjust it in there so that you can write what they can't do as much as what they can do. And that's what I really like for when you're meeting with parents, because this allows you to say not just they can't identify letter, word that begins with letter B, but that they can discriminate if there's two, but they can't independently do it yet. So it's pretty easy to adjust or differentiate when you're uploading that data in there. So photos, matrix. So work samples, the picture that I showed you of Addison's Native American writing is truly the work sample. It's something that she did independently in work. Then we've detailed, described what it is that she did in the activity, and then we've added the standards. And then you can also add notes. So if you're in conversation with a child, I have a little one that over the break went to Wisconsin to see her grandfather. He lives on a farm. He has cows, all kind of other things. She and I had a long conversation about her whole trip. Well, there was all kind of things she told me about that. She told me the number of cows that were there, the number of ducks. She told me about the baby calf. She told me about flying on the airplane. There's so much data collection in that. That's an example of somewhere where you go in and you would basically type out what she said and then attach it to the standards. So there's the 4 main ones that we would use for data collection. And as far as like the conversation part goes, I also carry around my classroom. So I just have a clipboard with their names. When they're giving you those like quick note things, like she's telling me all about her trip and all that, I just quickly like jot it down shorthand. And in that 15 minutes a day that I talked about, then I go to my computer and I sit down and I put it in there and link it to the standard. So this is just like the easy way. My kids are always finding it for me in the classroom, the clipboard, for collecting the notes. And then the other thing you can do is you actually can upload a video as well. You upload it just like a photo. So for example, in math small groups, we're adding and subtracting, playing a game, a quick like 20-second video of somebody completing an addition problem gets uploaded in there. It's really nice for, not necessarily necessary, I could write that they could do it, but it's really nice when you have those parent-led or student-led conferences and you have parents to show like, well, here's an example of them doing that, being able to share that. So, and again, sometimes when I go back and I watch these videos, you realize, well, yes, they counted and added, but I missed that they did this, or, so sometimes like the review of the video is actually a really great learning tool as well. So you enter all your evidence, and then you have this tab here, which is guidelines and checklists. So when you go in to manage the checklist, here's all of my friends. I left this one for us so that we could see it. Pearson will allow you to break your year into periods. You can break into periods of 4, 2, 3. Georgia Pre-K breaks into 2, so ignore the fact that there's a 3 here. That was my fault when I set up I've never set it up as an administrator before. I was just the teacher aspect of it. So this should be for Pre-K, reads Pre-K, would read period 1 and 2. So we run ours from August to December, and then again from January to May. For everybody else in other grade levels, I would say you would run it in 4 periods, and those would be your 4 quarters, basically. And so, as you'll see, mine have finalized checklists, except for my friend Davin, because I wanted to go in and show you all how we do that. But I am going to go into this one. So for each period, there's the domains, and you'll go into the domain. I'm going to use language and literacy. And here are all the standards, and here is all of the evidence that is attached there for it. And what's really nice is Pearson is set up for not yet, in progress, proficient, not applicable. So when you're not teaching the standard, that's all of you that are not teaching the standard or did not observe. And Pre-K did not observe is like, we've taught the standard, but I've never seen them do it. So that might not speak to other grade levels. In Pre-K, sometimes that pertains. But the NA would be, I guess, where you haven't covered the standard, that would be where you're checking it. So the nice thing is when you get here in this checklist where the I is with the evidence, when you click on it, it'll quickly to the side just populate, and I'm sorry, it will not let me scroll, but it'll populate all of the pieces of evidence that are here for that standard. So you can quickly, like if you're having trouble remembering, sorry, I want that to touch and it doesn't. If you're having trouble remembering whether she's able to do that or not, all your evidence for that standard is right there, and then you can quickly say, not yet, in progress, proficient. And then I guess I would correlate to the numbers that were 1, 2, and 3. And to me, the 4, so I know there's not one in there for that, but the 4, the exceeding, you would have evidence that fully supported that they're clearly exceeding that standard, and that's what you would rate on your report card. So I think the correlation would be the 1 is not yet, the 2 is in progress, and then 3 is proficient. Is that what you would say, Caroline?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And so the other thing that's great about it is when you click on the question marks that are here to the side for guidelines, it gives you, I'm really sorry it won't scroll down, but it gives you examples of how that standard could be assessed. So if you're having trouble trying to figure out, like sometimes in Pre-K with these ones that are in here, especially the social emotional ones and all, it's sometimes difficult to understand, well, how am I assessing that? It will populate a list of ideas for how you could assess that standard. Many of them are very quick, things that are there. So I always find that when I go in and I realize, oh, I don't have very many pieces of evidence for that standard, I always go into the question mark to find an easy way that I could quickly assess that standard. So right from the start, which is the Georgia Pre-K program, did not dictate how many pieces of evidence were necessary to rate a standard. I had a really hard time with that because I want to be told how many pieces of evidence I need to support it. So in my mind, and sort of what the district, Chatham County, came to, the conclusion was at least 3 pieces of evidence in order to rate a standard. Like, to have a pretty decent picture of whether they've grasped the concept or not, we want to have at least 3 pieces of evidence. So sometimes there's way more, and then sometimes there's not as many. But at least for me, we went through, and I think that would be something that together we would decide, like, what's adequate amount of evidence to rate the standard. And like I said, sometimes that the evidence tells you that they haven't met the standard, so it's held in there as well. All right, and so for each of the periods, you would have a checklist. And then the last thing, well, we'll go through reports in a minute. Let's go back on. The last tab is the reports. So the reporting process for Pearson actually creates a narrative summary. So it's a paragraph formatted explanation for each domain of what the children have mastered and what they have not mastered. When I first started teaching, they had something called template comments. So when you went into each one, it had an already populated sentence that said, Addison follows simple routines and procedures. Addison gets along well with others. Addison begins to recognize letters. But what they found was people were simply just inputting the template comments, and they weren't individualizing it all. And they didn't like that, because they said that this narrative summary report should be a little more specific and individualized. So they took away the template comments. So the way that I do it is in a Google document. When I started, we made the template comments for each domain. And then when you input it, I'm sorry, I don't know why this will not scroll, because y'all really need to see further down. Well, let's do it this way. I'm going to download it, and then we'll be able to see it. Okay. And it's very small font. Okay. Okay. So when you go into each of the domains, it's very specific about what Addison is able to do. So we'll use math for the example. She can identify numbers 1 through 10. She can count objects up to 10, can count to 39 by 1s and 100 by 10s. Goes through all the very specific things. Well, your evidence that is in there is how you've determined what she can do. In a Google document, I have pretty much verbatim this paragraph. And what I do is when I copy and paste it into this template, I go in and change what Addison can specifically do. If she can't recognize the 9 shapes, I list the shapes that she can't list. If she can pattern AB, or she can't pattern AB yet, you can go in and simply change out that part. So the beginning of creating the summary report is a little bit of work on your end, but once you've recreated it, all you're doing is adjusting, differentiating what that individual child is able to do. So the very first time you do the summary report, you'll have a little bit more work to do. I've been using the same paragraphs in this for 12 years now. The standards that we teach don't change, so what we're going to write in here isn't going to change very much. It's just going to change on the specifics of what that individual child is able to do. So when we give this to the parents, when we meet with them, this is what they're seeing. They're seeing the narrative summary report, which very specifically says the things that she isn't able to do. Addison's a very high achieving child. I'll pull up another one that shows, like, if there's something that we're working on, where it says in language and literacy she identifies 25 out of 26 capital letters. We're going to list the one that she doesn't have mastery of, so that they can work on that. So we just found over time that, let me see if you can scroll. Up and down? Okay. I was looking for the tab on the side. I guess that's right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Technology, but so we found that over time, the parents get hung up on 1, 2, 3, 4, the number. This is a sentence that they read, and it tells them exactly what she's capable of doing, or again, what she needs to be working on. Like, and this will change right now. It says she's working on producing rhyming words, segmenting sentences into words, and identifying beginning sounds. When we move to the end of the year, hopefully that's going to say Addison produces rhyming words, segments his words into syllables, and identifies beginning sounds at the end of the word. So the language of it, again, is just going to change. I have 2 templates. I have one for beginning of the year and one for end of the year. And I have one in girl format and boy format, so the pronouns, truly, it just becomes a copy and paste, and you're tweaking it a little bit. So it sounds a little bit overwhelming at first, but once you get the hang of it, it really makes things a lot easier. And then there's one for every domain, and this is where Caroline and I kind of talked about, if we could add in a religion one, then you would just have a box that also attested to the religion content standards that we are going over. So when my parents meet, we're going to do it. We're going to do it when we come back in January, just because this was piloted new this year. But when they come back in January, they will get this. The checklist that you saw can also be downloaded in its entirety, so you can have like a whole packet of your class checklist. As a rule for pre-K, we did not share the checklist with the parents. To us, the checklist was it was our rating. They might get the piece of paper that has the 1, 2, 3, 4, but they didn't see the checklist in entirety. They saw this and then our version of the report card. That's what they saw. The checklists were really in here for us. And the reason that they're for us, let's see, I'm going to go back. If you click on this tab for reports, there's 2 different ways we can generate the report. So in class profile, you see this is, it can go all the way, well, they have it through grade 5 now. I'm going to go in and I'm going to pull math. And so what this does right here is shows me everybody in my class that's in progress on that particular standard and everybody in that classroom that I rated proficient on that particular standard. So when I go to do my math groups next week and I'm trying to figure out how I want to group them or what I need to work on, this basically shows you the grouping. So we run 2 small groups a day. So I use this in planning, like when I'm planning from one to the next, to help me group the students. And I'll do that for every student and every standard. It's all in there. I like it because it shows you, like, if you haven't taught it yet, it'll populate that that's there, or that you haven't recorded a response, you haven't gone in and checked that you've had it, that reminds you, oh, I need to go back and look and see why I haven't rated that yet, or maybe it's I haven't collected data for that yet, so I need to make sure I collect that data. So that's one report. The other report that is helpful in planning is the class ratings. You have to give it a title, so I'm just giving it one. And I'm gonna look for the preliminary ratings. We'll go in language and literacy for this one. So you could do all of them at once. I'm gonna do one, and hopefully it's gonna populate for thinking about it. There we go. Okay. So if you're a tables person, this one, when you go in, will show, I didn't populate it with data, so hold on, let's see if we can try that again. Let's see if we can get the final. Let's do it that way. There we go. Okay. So if you're a tables person, you can also see it this way. So this will show you, and it could show you for each period or marking period what you've rated them, so that you can see for each standard what you've rated them, and then moving across, you could see from one to the next, like we were talking about, whether they had dropped, which we know can happen sometimes. That's all populated there in this report. You can do it for each domain. You can do it for the whole, everything all at once. And again, this was just really for use more in planning, but once you've gone in and rated those checklists, then it populates all of this for you. So this was like a major help when we were in planning of small group instruction. I would say that was a big help for us. That's a lot. Questions? Go ahead.
So the paperwork that you took a picture of, you still keep that? Do you send it home?
It might be hanging in the hallway for the Native American symbols were in the hallway for a while, and then when I was tired of looking at them, those went right on home to the parents. And the reason is the picture's there. It's in work sampling. Work sampling is archived at the end of the year. Pearson would have access to it moving beyond these years. We don't necessarily keep the proof of that. However, the checklist and the narrative summaries of what we did at the end of the years, we downloaded all of that. You can download the class up. We filed them in the PR so that they were held on site. The narrative summary report and the checklist to me would be the most important information. A copy was also given to the kindergarten teacher, so the kindergarten teacher has like the comprehensive report of this is what this child, whether they read it or not, but they have the report for it there. So that's how we handled that. Oh, I'm sure you do.
So, and the standards are already loaded, you said?
The standards are loaded. So when you go in, we did not input any of that. When you go in, now that I can scroll and I've learned how to work this, maybe. It's running slow. Let's go here. Okay. I'm going to pick somebody first. When you go in and pick, like, so for mathematical thinking, this is everything in its entirety as it would correlate to the Georgia Early Learning and Development Standards. And when you click on it again, you can also get from here the question mark. So sometimes it happens that we collect a piece of evidence and we say, oh, but I don't know what standard to rate that for. This sort of breaks that down for you. Like the -1 pattern here could go with uses words and representations to describe mathematical ideas. So that part's helpful too when you're not sure what standard it necessarily matches. So
In y'all's report card, what does that look like?
So St. Peter's is using multiple ones this year because
So you
typically,
just started this.
right, because
Okay.
we were piloting that and in one pre-K, not the other,
Right,
this
right.
year. So typically, right from the start would say that the parents get the narrative summary report. So they get that comprehensive report in December and again in May or late April. So in public school, I did not utilize a 1, 2, 3, 4. The only thing that my parents got was a comprehensive report. Now, on the side, they also got a paper that I did that had some other like checklists similar to like the report card. I think how it would correlate, how moving forward it would correlate was that they would see what y'all see, the 1, 2, 3, 4. You would simply use the not yet, in progress, and proficient as your 1, 2, 3. So whatever you're rating in here just gets translated to the number for the parent.
That's helpful to be able to like put it in
Right.
the box and know what's the one.
Right. So I think that's how, and like I said, Pearson doesn't account for 4 exceeds, but I think in my mind, exceeds would mean that you have multiple pieces of evidence for that standard that shows that they've gone beyond that. That's where you would justify. But like I said, I like it because the evidence is sitting right
Yeah.
sitting right there. So, any other
Thank you.
questions? It's a lot. It sounds like a lot of work. I promise once you start doing it, I mean, this is when I came to St. Peter's, I said, I really want this. How do we go about getting this? Because it just makes so much sense for collecting the data and improving how you're rating. You know, it's less subjective when you can look right here at it and say, well, I've said that they're in progress or that they can't do it yet. They haven't mastered it yet. And this is why I've said that. So in technology, like I said, now being able to put things in a cloud or Google Photos, however, it means you can look at it anywhere. And really work on it from anywhere too. You don't necessarily have to be tied to your computer, your area.
Thank you so much, Julie.
That's great.
And I will say, I talk fast anyway, but I will say that Pearson, this was developed, so 2011 they piloted and then mandated in 2012. You can, and I'll send Caroline the links. You can go to YouTube. There's all kind of, it's funny because they're from 12 years ago, so they seem old to me, like the little overview videos and all of that. To listen, it gives you a little bit more thorough, obviously, and then Pearson conducts training on this as well. So I gave you like the fast course overview of it, but there's much more training that, you can learn, kind of play around with it. That's how when we went to training, we spent a whole day, and that's what they did. They gave us various things, and we practiced inputting it and using it. And really, the more you use it, the easier it becomes. But this to me is like, once you've done it for a while, you kind of can do it in your sleep. It just becomes second nature to tap it and pick the standard. So. You're welcome.